everyone. Sorry for the strange lighting. I'm in the greenhouse again just because it's been snowy still, and so mostly what I'm doing is in the greenhouse. So here we are. I want to talk about soil blocking troubleshooting tonight and some little tips and tricks for some problems that I've found with soil blocking. So there is definitely a learning curve to soil blocking. If you are used to starting seeds in your traditional seed tray, like one of these, then there is going to be a learning curve when it comes to all of a sudden switching to a soil block, which, in case you're new to my channel, these are soil blocks. They're just little babies. So number one thing that is different between a seed tray like this, a 32 or a 72 seed tray, is the soil blocks dry out quite a bit faster than a seed tray. So where I would have to water my seedlings in a seed tray maybe every 3 days, I have to water my 3/4 inch soil blocks at least once a day and sometimes twice a day if it's a warmer day. So if you are not the kind of person who wants to be spending that kind of time watering your seedlings, then soil blocking might not be for you, especially if you're in a dry climate like we are here in Denver. So there's that. Troubleshooting number 2. One of the things I've been trying to figure out is what is the best tray for soil blocking. So when you're using the larger soil blocks, such as these 2-inch soil blocks, which is what we use for our sweet peas. So when you're using these guys, it's not that hard to find a tray that's going to work because, for example, these all fit in a standard 10-20 tray easily. This tray has some drainage channels in it. I don't leave any standing water in there, but they fit. They're fine. However, if I put my 3/4 inch blocks into a 10-20 tray like that, let me find one that's doing this. So what happens is there's a little lip. Aha, here's one. So there's a little lip in this tray. See here where the irrigation, where the water drainage is? And so what happens is these little blocks tip into this channel. And so then they're all wonky. They're not facing up the right way, they're growing sideways, so that's a problem. So then I tried using these, what's recommended by Lisa Ziegler, which is the foam tray, like a basic tray that meat comes on. So we have some of those there. Now the problem is for the quantities that I'm growing, those trays just aren't big enough. So if you are doing small quantities, like 20 of each seed, then those trays actually work really well because what they have is a shorter side. So when you put a small 3/4 inch block in here, just trying to grab one. So when you put a 3/4 inch block in here, you can see that you can still see that block above the side. So that means there's a lot of air circulation around the soil block. If you have a really high side here, like a 10-20 tray, there's not as much air circulation, and you're going to be more prone to fungus and mold and algae growth. So these ones with the low sides are great, especially for home gardeners. These are fine. So what I've actually found works the best for me is these, I got these from a restaurant that was going out of business, and they are very long, and they fit 2 3/4 inch soil blocks. So here's one, and here's the second one. And then I just go all the way across with these. So these hold a lot. So I can do one variety, and I can do almost 300 in one tray. So these are awesome for me. They have the lower sides, and they just hold a lot. They're nice and stable too, so they're not floppy and bendy like when you could tell when I pick up a 10-20 tray, it's floppy. This is super secure, so it's not gonna bend and drop seedlings. I can carry it with one hand. It's made out of fiberglass, so yeah, definitely recommend those. Okay, so another thing you might, that it can be troublesome when you are soil blocking is moving your seeds. So Let's say that something happens, like one of my foam trays cracked, and so it's not super usable anymore because it kind of seemed like it was gonna break right down the middle and spill on my seedlings, so I needed to move those. So I use, when I'm moving them, I use my little paint scraper that I also use for stirring up my soil mixtures. So, and for scraping off the bottom of my seed block, this is what I use to also move my seed blocks. So, my soil blocks. I always call them seed blocks. So anyway, let's change the angle, and I'm going to show you how exactly to do that. It's not rocket science, but you might want to see anyway. Alright, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paint scraper, and I'm going to, it's best to do this, by the way, when your soil blocks are slightly dry. You don't want them to dry out, but slightly dry is good because they're just a lot more movable. They're not going to fall apart on you. So even like right now, even though some of them fell off, they did not fall apart because they're just a little dry. They hold together a little bit better. So then once I get them where I want them to go, I'm just going to gently slide them off. Paint scraper. These ones I can actually even just pick up with my hands because they're still well formed. That's a sign of a good seed block, is when you can pick it up and move it with your fingers and it does not fall apart. That's good blocking. Okay, so let's talk about what to do if your soil blocks get dried out. So if you accidentally forget for a day to water these, I mean, I'm going to show you because this one is, I've let these ones go and get dried out, but they are crumbly. These are very dry. So what you want to do, if the seedlings are very, very young and you let them get very dried out, the seeds might not germinate. But say, for example, these are young seedlings like these ones, and they still look fairly healthy. The best way to resuscitate them is going to be to top water them first. So water them with a little spray bottle just to weigh down the tops and get a little bit of moisture in there. And then after you've done that, go ahead and come in with your watering can. And I'm just going to pour some water in the bottom and just let that water just soak up. It's just going to wick right up from the bottom. So you'll see they're starting to retain color. So if you don't spray them first, it's just they tend to float up toward the top, and then it's really hard to get them rehydrated again once they're floating around at the top. You never want to overhead water these seed blocks, especially with a big watering can or jug, because look what happens. If you water them from the top like this, and they're dry especially, they just go all over the place. So that's why the recommendation is to bottom water. Just use a small watering can with a long spout and go from the bottom. Don't top water because these now are all a mess, and just look how they float around once they get dry. Don't let them get over dry. Way to water. I'm going to show you the right way to water. So use a watering can. This is just a basic resin watering can with a long spout. And that way I can very carefully place my water so that didn't disturb any of the soil blocks at all. Just went right in between. There you go. It's that easy. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to troubleshooting soil blocking is soil consistency. So I'm going to show you what it looks like when your soil is too dry and also when it's too wet for soil blocking. So let's do it. All right, so here we go. So we've got some soil, and this soil is damp, but it's not what I would call wet. So when I press it out, there's no residual water happening down here. I'm going to press it pretty hard. And I'm going to scrape down, which I use my paint scraper, scrape off the soil blocker, and then I'm going to press it down, and when I release, okay, so you can see like here's a dry spot. They're just a little bit uneven in terms of formation. There's lots of like gapping here. There's not a firm divot. So this is what it looks like when your soil is too dry. So, all right, let's start again. Okay, so the second problem that we sometimes see is soil being too wet when we're soil blocking. So, If you see any standing water before you press your soil block, or if it just looks generally, you can see how wet this is. Now they do tell you to use the texture of peanut butter, so I mean this is kind of peanut buttery, so it's easy to see why you might keep it too wet. But let's see what happens. So if we do our first press, then I'll come in and do a second press, come in and do a third press. All right, oh, see, that's not even staying in the soil block. So that's what'll happen. If it's too wet, it won't even hold its shape in the block. So let's add in a little bit of the dry from this side of the bin. Just make it a little bit less wet. Okay, so let's try this. This is still fairly wet. Let's see what this is gonna look like when we press this into our tray. All right. So when this is too wet, you can see like this one didn't stick at all. When you touch them, this one deforms. So if I were to try to pick this up, which you should be able to do with the soil block and it's the right consistency, is pick it up and toss it in the air and catch it. I mean, these just totally fall apart. So if they're too wet, they're not going to hold their shape. All right, let's try again. Okay, so here's what our soil looks like when it's just right. So when we press down, I do usually one press, and then I come in and I do a second press. So you can see there's some water coming out of the top of the soil blocker. So as I'm pressing down, there's a little bit of water coming out. Let's go ahead and do 3 presses. And I actually don't need to scrape that. That's pretty flat on the bottom. So let's see how this one looks. Press it down, and just squeeze and release. They're holding together. So you can see this one has nice firm divots in the top where you're going to be putting your soils. It's fairly level all the way across, and it's still holding its shape. So this is exactly what we're going for. So just a little bit of water coming out of the top of the soil blocker. I'll show you one more time what you want that to look at like. So you can see there's a little bit of water that accumulates in the bottom of the bin after I pressed it out. So I do keep some dry soil close by that I can mix into that. But just as you're pressing it out, that's just kind of the nature of soil blocking. It presses out a little bit of moisture, so it gets a little bit wet as you go. I'll just stir in a little bit of dry, and then I'll go again, press down once, press down twice. There's our water, just a little bit coming out the top. Making sure we get into the corners quite well. Squeeze, 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 wiggle, wiggle. Again, pretty flat there. Press down. There we go. That's what we want. Okay, so I hope that helped. If you're having any questions about soil blocking, those are just a few of the questions that I get most frequently. So if you have any others, please feel free to let me know and I will address it in another video coming up.